Well, I would like to welcome you all to our monthly Leadership Basics training. My name is Dadra Driscoll, and I am excited to have the opportunity to share with you on tips and tools that will help strengthen your leadership skills. I am, in addition to being a travel agent, I am also a certified member of the John Maxwell team. So I'm excited to be bringing to you some great information to help you become a greater leader, not only in your travel business, but in life and in all the areas that you lead in. In this series, we are covering the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John C. Maxwell. So each month we're covering one law, and this is a series that we have been doing for a little while. So if you are just new to our Leadership Basics training and you would like to take advantage of the information we covered on the previous laws, at the end, I will also be pointing out my YouTube channel because I have saved them and I put them in a leadership playlist so you can access the previous recordings as well. But this month we are on law number 8, the law of pain. Good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. Wow, the interesting thing when I first saw the name of the law, I thought, wow, if I'm going to put something out there and say, hey, come and let's talk about pain, uh, I knew it wouldn't be a favorite topic, but I'm grateful that those of you that have showed up really were willing to press through and get to know about it because it's something that we all experience. And often when we're experiencing situations of pain, it's one of the opportunities for us to truly get to know who we really are and what we're made of. So, again, let's talk about the law of pain. Good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. So, it's sometimes you're in a situation and you kind of see it coming. You're thinking, oh, this is going to hurt. Other times it just kind of happens and it comes and you didn't anticipate it. You had the greatest hopes that it was going to turn out one way and it turns out a different way. Regardless of how it takes place, pain is something that's going to hurt. And so I'm not diminishing that when we have experiences that bring us pain, that there's things that we feel that it's not something comfortable and welcome that we're like, oh, I can't wait for pain to happen. That's not how it works. So I'm in no way trying to diminish that. But what I am here to do is to help you get perhaps a different perspective on painful situations and also give you some tools and some ideas of ways that you can navigate through and come out on the other side in a better way. So, when it comes to managing bad experiences, let's tell the truth about bad experiences. One, everyone has them, no one is exempt, and no one likes them. Few will make bad experiences into positive experiences. Sometimes, when something bad happens, it derails a person and they don't recover from it. We want to talk about it in a safe space tonight so that when we talk about it again, it's something that has happened and or will happen to all of us. There will be times that aren't all rosy, that aren't all, flowers and candy and birds chirping. Sometimes bad things happen. And because we know that, it's important that we as leaders are prepared not only to know how to navigate it when it happens to us, but also understanding how to assist those that we lead when it's happening to them. Because often when bad things happen, we feel as if we're the only one. Why is this happening to me? Woe is me. And all of those very valid emotions that come up. But whether you stay in those places is what's really going to become the defining factor. Because one thing I want to say before we, delve deeper into this, for those of you who may have been following along in the book, John McDonnell had a quote where he says, every problem introduces a person to himself. When something doesn't go the way we wanted it to go, it really shows us what we're made of. Again, is it something where we tighten up and barrel through it, or is it something where we just fall out and we can't get past it? And what are we really made of? Who am I? So if you think back to the time that something happened that was a bad experience, your first reaction out the gate, did you feel as if it's over? I'll never recover. Or did you come to a first thought of, how can I get through this? What do I need to do? That's the introduction to yourself. That's important because it's good to know and important to know what place you're starting from. Some people are basically positive people, and so they always see the glass half full. Others may have more of a negative spin and they see the glass as half empty. So, how you are affected when a bad experience happens is really important because it's going to help you start figuring out, either do I need to make adjustments to how I view life and experiences, both good and bad, or am I in a good place that I can strengthen and move forward from? So now we're going to take a walk through what's referred to by John as the pain file, because there's lots of different types of pains that we experience. They're not all the same. They're not all created equal. Some you may be able to shake off with no problem and jump right back up. Others may be stifling. And so it's also important to understand, the different types of pain, because as I mentioned before, everyone has them. No one likes it. It's not as if we want it to happen, but when it does happen, it's really important how we face it. So let's start with the pain of inexperience. When something happens to us because of inexperience, our reaction is often, I have never been through that. I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. So if you've ever experienced the pain of inexperience where something happened and it was the first time that anything like that had ever happened to you, I want you to put a 1 in the chat box. Let's be honest. We're in a safe space. All of us have been through some or maybe even all of these, but something happened and it kind of came and blindsided you. It was something you'd never experienced or you weren't prepared for. The next one, slightly different, is the pain of incompetence. I know we don't like that word, but that's when something happens and, I should have seen that coming. Wow, I should have known better. Now, for those of you that are parents, I'm sure that that's one that you've observed in your children. And it's one of those things sometimes that you got to let them go through and you can't fix it for them. But sometimes, the older people might say, you got to get that bought sense. You have to go through some things sometimes. But often, we have that time where we should have seen it coming, we should have known better, but for whatever reason, we didn't. And pain can be caused as a result of that. Now, just to back up, with inexperience, there's not really anything you can do for inexperience other than experience. And now that you've experienced it, hopefully you will have learned from it and you won't repeat it. But the pain of incompetence is different because, I probably should have known better, but I didn't do better. So that's when a decision has to come into play where, you know what, I just got to do the right thing because I know it's the right thing to do, or not do something because I know that I shouldn't do it, whatever the appropriate application might be. Our next one is the pain of disappointment. That's something, I wish that it never happened. We're disappointed. Somebody let us down, maybe, or, we really anticipated it going a certain way and it didn't happen. And now we're just disappointed about it. Disappointment can be hard because, again, you saw the outcome in a certain way. You had the vision for it. You were all, your anticipation of an outcome, and then it didn't happen the way that you thought it would have happened. And you thought, gee, I wish that never happened. The pain of disappointment. That's a little different because often disappointments are the result perhaps of what someone else has done, and we had no control over it. So that's going to trigger a different set of emotions. How about the pain of conflict? Human encounter doesn't always feel good. We're at it with someone. We're at odds with someone, in a disagreement with someone. We've had a falling out. The pain of conflict. Now, with conflict, there can be resolution in many cases, but sometimes if we don't address it appropriately, we can allow the pain to consume us where we don't even open a door for resolution. I know often, people will say, I'll forgive, but I won't forget, and things like that. So again, the pain of conflict is usually something that's rooted in human encounter, and it never feels good. It's something, it ties also and runs parallel with disappointment, because usually conflict between two people is the result of one person doing something that the other person wished they hadn't done. It also can happen when you're just at odds. I see it one way and that person sees it another way, and we cannot find a common ground, or we refuse to find a common ground, because that often happens too. No one is willing to compromise. We've dug in. This is how it is. This is how I see it. This is how you see it. And we both think the other person is wrong. So let's move to the pain of change. I didn't want that to happen. The pain of change. Sometimes change is inevitable and change has to take place. But when it happens, it causes us pain because it's something that we did not want to happen. Something comes to an end, it's run its course. Or maybe, the company's going in a different direction and now they want to let you go. They're changing. When I have that kind of feeling, I didn't want it to happen. I wish it had never happened. I didn't, I just don't like it. That's tough because the pain of change is often not something that we can do anything about. A lot of times, pain is not something we can do anything about. Some we can, but some it's completely out of our hands. And when those pains happen, they're going to trigger and hit different emotions and different triggers within us that we've got to learn from our first reaction. What is the first thing that came to mind? Often, even before we speak. So let me throw that in there, because often when pain happens, the first reaction is to just blurt something out. And often we need to pause for a moment before we do that, and not just take the immature route and spurt out something before we've had a chance to think through it. So that's one of the other reasons why we're talking about the law of pain too, because as a leader, as you mature, you learn to be slower to speak, because you can't take those words back that may have been said out of anger or pain or disappointment and things like that. So that's one of those life lessons for those of you that might be a little bit younger on the call, might not have learned yet. For those of you who've lived a little bit, I'm sure you've learned sometimes I need to not say the first thing that came to mind. And if that's you, you're in good company, because again, as you mature, you learn the wisdom in that you can't always say, and you shouldn't always say the very first thing that comes to mind. But let's move on. What happened to my screen? Let me make sure you guys. Can see me? All right, there we go. Here's one, the pain of bad health. If something happened and you lost something you thought you would always have, the joy of youth and vitality and immortality that we feel that we have, there's something different if something physical happens where now you're limited in what you can do. That's a different kind of pain, and it also has a different psychological impact on you. So, of course, I would hope and wish that no one ever have to deal with this particular pain. But if you've ever had a diagnosis or an injury or an accident or something that impaired your health and inadvertently not just the physical pain that may come along with whatever that issue is. There's a lot of psychological things that come along with it because I feel that I've lost what I thought I would always have. If your ability is limited in some kind of way, or if you're unable to do something that you used to be able to do, again, it's more than just the physical pain of the injury or ailment. It's also the psychological pain of feeling, like you're not good enough anymore, or you can't always do what you wanted to do. And that's one that often we don't talk about as much when we talk about things like this because you just figure people, they'll get better. But often after an accident, people stop calling after, an appropriate period of time. If something happens or there's a diagnosis, the first couple weeks, you may be showered with people who are quote unquote concerned. But after a certain period of time, people may not ask how you're doing anymore. And it's really tough at times because there's things that are going on the inside that are different from just, like I said, maybe a diagnosis or a physical ailment, and understanding who you are and what you're really made of in those times of weakness or frailty. I'll use that word even, can be tough. And I will say also with this one, because I do want to take a little moment because it's not one that's talked about as much. Knowing that, you want to go and you want to do, and feeling as if your body has perhaps betrayed you in some way and won't allow you is a tough thing. And being able to push through pain if need be, or push through or have to do extra things. One of the things that I work with our group on our special disabilities calls of helping travel agents help people travel who have, special needs. That's something that a lot of people take for granted. We're travel agents, so the ability to hop on a plane and go to the far reaches of the world whenever you want to is something that you can very easily take for granted. And if something were to happen where there was an impairment that made that more difficult, that can also have a great impact on you. So the pain of bad health is one that we don't want to overlook. And if you've got people in your life or people in your organization, people that you're responsible for and or to, that are dealing with this particular pain, it's important to understand that it's not just the pain of the accident or the pain of the injury or the pain of the particular diagnosis, but it is also the emotional and psychological things that go along with not being able to do the things that they once did or losing out on things. And even just the fact of having to endure pain over time, chronic illnesses and things like that can carry a great weight. So, as a leader, it also takes a special level of empathy to deal with people and not just dismiss them. Understand, that if someone is dealing with a chronic situation, that takes a different toll on them, that especially if you've never experienced it, you may not understand. And so you want to give a little extra grace to yourself, if it's you, or to those that you're dealing with, because there's something different that you may not understand that's going on with them. And being empathetic is really important. The next one is the pain of hard decisions. Realizing that you can't make everyone happy. If you've been in a leadership situation and you had to let someone go or give someone, a reprimand or tough advice or tough love, as we record it, that's a hard thing to do, especially if you have the type of personality where you're a people pleaser and you want everyone to like you. Sometimes they're not going to like what you have to say. Sometimes the hard decisions have to be made. You're a business owner now, and sometimes you're going to have to make decisions for the good of your business and the good of your organization that everyone is not going to be in favor of. And you've got to be able to have that thick skin to endure if they didn't like what you had to say. I'm not giving you, carte blanche to be rude or do things in an unprofessional way, but I'm simply saying sometimes when you make those decisions where you have to make the cuts or you have to let someone go and things like that, there's a pain attached to those hard decisions, especially if it's someone who you have a personal relationship with, you've come to uh, know them over time and things like that, we hear the phrase about, well, it's not personal, it's just business. But sometimes there's a personal element and it can be difficult and there's a pain attached to that. And so how we handle that is important. The level of grace that we give and that we use in those situations is also important. Let's talk about the pain of financial loss. If I could only get that back. Hopefully, you've not necessarily experienced this one, but if you have, you know that it is something that can be devastating when a person loses a job or has a cut in pay or the prices of things change. And then, we experience loss as a result of that. For many, they experienced that when the pandemic happened. Because of the changing dynamic of the world around us, many people lost things financially that they had no plan for, they had no backup for, and it created a situation for them. People lost homes. People have come into a situation, as a result of financial loss where they may have lost monetary or not monetary, but lost physical things. Like they may have lost a home or lost a car or things like that. Financial loss is something that, again, is going to not only have the pain of the initial loss itself, but it's going to have certain emotional and psychological things that come along with it. If someone has been in a particular tax bracket and they've been seen, in a certain light, it can be difficult for them if they have to build again or start over. That often is a tough thing that people don't know how to bounce back from. The appearances and things like that. They don't want people to look at them differently because, of a loss that they've experienced. So that's another one of those things that's important to consider when you're talking about the pain file. These are different types of pains and they each affect us very differently. How about the pain of relationship losses? Some people will grow in a different direction than I. Now, the pain of relationship losses, can vary. It can be, people who, were your friends back in high school and growing up, and then as your life went in a different direction, you became a business owner. Perhaps their life went down a different path and you all don't have the things in common anymore. And you got to let people go sometimes when you get to a different level in life. Or it could be that you've been in a relationship and there's been some type of break. It could be infidelity, it could be divorce, it could be any of these different types of relationship losses that hit very differently, especially if it's someone that you've known for a long time, someone that you loved and cared for deeply. You want to know that, what did I do wrong? Or, was it something that I said? How could it? I mean, you can run down, I could go on and on with a list of questions that you may ask in the pain of a relationship loss. But sometimes it's not that anyone did anything. It could be, like I said, just that you've grown in different directions. Let's keep moving on. We've got a few more things in the pain file. The pain of not being number one. I deserve to be there. Now, for my overachievers and those of you who are the head of the class and used to being number one, it can be tough when you don't win, when you're not the center of attention. And with this particular pain, apart from the loss factor, so to speak, you also have to look at and battle not to fall over into envy or jealousy. Because sometimes instead of being able to celebrate the person who is number one, the pain of not being number one for someone who has that competitive nature and that is used to being on top, they may fall into a scenario where instead of being able to celebrate someone else's win, bitterness comes in, like I said, envy or jealousy. And so with that particular pain, you want to pay attention to what your first gut reaction is. And if it's not being able to celebrate someone else and accept that, hey, they just did better than me this time, I'll do better next time, or things like that. If you can't easily get to that, then there may be some work that needs to be done about the root and where your heart falls with that one. The pain of traveling. How do you feel when you go away? Are you worried about what's going on at home? If you've got, children that you leave behind, are you feeling guilty because you didn't bring them? There can be a pain when it comes to traveling and moving about. Instead of being able to enjoy where you are, you're worried about what's going on at home. Is everything okay in my business? Can I trust the people that I left to have handle the things that I needed to have handled while I'm away? Where you can't fully disconnect and enjoy where you are because you're busy in worry and anxiety over the things you've left behind. How about that one? Hopefully you don't feel that way because travel is life for us. But sometimes, like I said, people are worried and haven't, put the trust in people, or they've got questions about the people they've had to put trust in. Let's talk about the pain of responsibility. Now, this one as a leader is heavy, because people expect so much from you. When you're the one in charge, when you're the one that's responsible, and you bear the weight of everyone. If I don't get it right, it's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect others. Or they're expecting me to make the right decision every time, and I don't know if I'm going to make the right decision. That's one as a leader that we have to understand. Yes, people are depending on us, and yes, we're going to do our due diligence to make the right decisions. But you have to also accept and understand that there will be times that you may not get it right. And it is not the end of the world. It is not the end all, and I've got to give up and I'm no longer a leader. Every leader has made a bad decision before, or, maybe chose the wrong option. And it does happen sometimes, but it's going to really be a matter of how do I recover from that? If I made a wrong decision, what is the next right decision I can make to straighten the course or to recover from that poor decision? The pain file. So we've looked at quite a few, quite a few in the pain file. So I want you to take a moment as we think back over these different pains that we've talked about. Can you resonate with any of those? Are any of those pains that you've experienced? Maybe more than one, probably. But how did you react? What did you learn about yourself in that moment? Because once a pain hits, how do you turn that pain into a gain? What am I going to do in that moment? The pain file helps us identify areas where the pain may happen, but it's going to really be important for you to come back and say, okay, this has happened. Now, what do I need to do to turn this pain into a gain? Some of it is going to really have to do with choosing a positive life stance. I started out earlier talking about how inherently some people see the glass half empty and some see the glass half full. And that's one of those analogies that people, you know, it's a popular one people have heard. Or if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Now, for some people, they've heard that, but the reality is if life gives them lemons, they want to take those lemons and throw them at somebody. They're not trying to make lemonade out of them. But having a positive life stance is going to be really important for you to be able to bear up under the pain and rise above it. So, what are your life assumptions and presumptions, about life, about people, about experiences? Some people think, just think people are bad. They think all people are bad and they're just waiting on someone to do something to them. That's not a good attitude to have because if that's what you're looking for, you're always going to find someone to disappoint you. But it is important to understand what your life assumptions are. Do you start with an expectation that people are good or that experiences can be dealt with? With a positive life stance, good will become better and bad will not be as bad. Not saying bad won't happen, but when you start with a positive life stance, it's not as bad because you can then see a way of overcoming. And understanding that even though life may not always be the way we would hope it would be, it is always the way it turns out. So, how are you going to view the final result? Okay, it happened. Now what? What are our next steps to recover from this? How do I recover from this? How do I get better, stronger, move further from this? Because a positive life stance is going to find positive lessons in every life experience. It may not have been the way I wanted it to be, but what can I take from this to grow? How can I improve from this? How can I recover from this? Depending on what the pain is. You know, I thought that me and this person were going to be together forever, and now it's just me. What am I going to do now that I'm alone? So, turning your pain into gain. As we mentioned, you want to choose a positive life stance. Decide that life is basically good. If you kind of do the statistics, so to speak, weigh the good versus bad, none of us have had a life that was 100 or 99% bad. The bad just is loud when it happens. But we've had good. Life is basically good. And when you look at life from that way, when something happens that was negative, that was unexpected, that caused us pain, putting it in perspective. If you're dealing with the pain of bad health, once you've overcome that situation or as you're overcoming that situation, being able to find a place of thankfulness for life and strength that you do have and things of that nature become really important. It's important to embrace and develop your creativity because being creative will often show you the way. We made the comment about lemons and lemonade. I'm sure that adage came from a creative idea that someone took the lemons and said, hey, let me add a little sugar and water, and now I've got lemonade. And that same concept applies if you're in a situation of loss and lack, figuring out what can I do in this? Now, we saw just recently during the time of the pandemic, tons of entrepreneurs were birthed out of that situation. When their jobs were gone and they couldn't do the things that they would normally do, there was a burst of creativity where people found new outlets and new ways. So, people who've lost a job and then came up with a witty idea to create a business and come back from that loss. So, when you're in a situation, it's also important to embrace and develop your creativity. Is there a way that I can make a way out of this no way? Also, you want to embrace the value of bad experiences. We all face difficulties, but we do not all learn from them. Like I said, some people might need to put that work in on that internal barometer. Am I going to learn from this situation and pick myself up and move forward from it? Or am I going to wallow in self pity and pain? Woe is me. Why did this happen to me? It shouldn't have, they did me wrong, or whatever the case may be. Or am I going to learn from it and move forward and move positively out of this bad situation? And this is especially important that we learn if something happened because of a bad decision we made. Now, we don't like to always talk about that. If pain happened because you were wrong and you did something wrong, that is especially a time for you to learn. Why did I make that bad decision? And what can I do to not make that decision going forward or to make better decisions than that going forward? Not trying to shift the blame, but accepting and taking ownership for your part in that, and then saying, what can I do better next time? That's also very important. So it's also important to make good changes after bad experiences and release the resentment. Hey, maybe I got connected with something I shouldn't have or someone I shouldn't have, but you know what? I'm not going to be resentful about it. I'm going to move forward from it. These are, again, are important decisions and things to make so that when you're in a situation that causes pain, you're able to turn it into gain. What can I do better? Maybe, if it's a health situation that was connected to my diet or my lifestyle, maybe I need to make some changes and not be mad about it. Release the resentment and move forward. Next, take responsibility for your life. Am I going to be the victim or the victor in this situation? What am I going to do? What decision am I going to make? Because the choice is going to be yours. Are you going to decide that, you know what? Okay, it happened. What's next? I love stories of overcoming and what people have done. And I recall a story about a gentleman. He had a scenario, he lost both of his legs. And, it was a perfect opportunity for him to wallow in self pity and to become angry at the world and to give up and to become the victim. But instead, he learned how, to utilize his prosthetics and to strengthen himself again and get back out into the world. And it took a lot, but it was just interesting that when he was sharing his testimony, he talked about the fact that he had to get over what had happened and move into what was next. Taking responsibility for your life, am I going to be the victim or the victor, is important. In the midst of that pain, feel it, experience it, and then decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay in this cycle or am I going to move forward from it? What is the outcome that I can attain as a result of this? Now, the truth about being accountable and responsible for one's life is that very few are. Often if you look at, especially in our society today, Different people have been raised in different ways, but a lot of people in today's society want to blame someone else. They don't want to take responsibility for their part in being accountable and being responsible for what's happening in their life. But as a leader, it's important that we do. It's important that we're accountable and responsible for the things that happen, because not only is it going to affect us, but it also affects the people that we lead. This is a true statement for everyone. Everyone should. But as a leader, we have a level of accountability that's a little higher standard than others. And I know at times, excuse me, that may seem that that's not fair. It's important that no matter what happens, we have to make a decision. And in that, it can be hard. It may seem, callous, but no matter what happens, our attitude toward a negative experience, positive and hopeful or negative and defeated, will put us on a chosen path. So if you choose to be positive and hopeful, it's going to set your trajectory toward that. If you decide to be negative and defeated, it's going to also put you on a trajectory, but it's going to be pointing you in a totally different direction. So it's going to be important that we're responsible and accountable for how we react and deal with pain and disappointment and all of those things on the pain file that we looked at. How is it going to end? That's going to be up to you. It's definitely going to be a result of the decisions that you make and the choices that you make. Now, Neil Walsh, he says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Wow. Dealing with pain is going to force you outside of your comfort zone. If you live long enough and you experience enough life, you're going to be pushed to the edge and beyond of your comfort zone. So it's important to make a decision about the location of the comfort zone, that you're open and willing to move outside of it. If you've experienced that loss and the feeling is, I don't know if I can go on, well, yes, you can. You've just got to push beyond the edge of your comfort zone. If you're dealing with the physical pain, again, for people who work out and they, do muscle bodybuilding or resistance things to build muscle, there's pain involved with that, but there's also the great results on the other side. And so any of those different uh, areas of the pain file that we talked about earlier, when they happen, you've got to be willing to experience life again after the pain. And that's going to begin at the end of your comfort zone. So it's also going to be important, again, how do you see it? Am I a glass half full or half empty? Am I a let's make lemonade or I want to throw and hit someone with the lemons kind of person? Where do you stand? And as a leader, understanding that, but also giving grace and being empathetic to those that you lead when you recognize that they're dealing with pain, that you can help them make these same kind of decisions as well. Those are things that are really, really important. So I want to thank you for joining us for this month's Leadership Basics training. We're going to be opening in just a moment for questions. So I want to give you guys a chance to get them together. But again, I thank you for coming on the call, because it's always important that we take time as leaders to strengthen our leadership arsenal. And the law of pain is one of those laws that we don't always want to talk about. No one wants it to feel uncomfortable, but it's important that we understand that good management of bad experiences leads to great growth. Again, my name is Dadra Driscoll. I encourage you to follow my YouTube channel, MMI Management. I do have a leadership playlist there where our previous lessons can be found.